offensive against crime, against narcotics, against permissiveness in our country.
The rhetoric of get tough and law and order was part and parcel of the backlash of the civil rights movement.
Nixon administration official has admitted that the war on drugs was all about throwing black people in jail. He said, quote, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
Hello everyone, this is Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report. That is a little piece out of the 13th. If you follow me on my main Facebook page, not my scoop or anything, my personal page, I was watching it yesterday. I kept getting told, you need to see this, you need to see this. And one thing I pride myself in the fact is that I don't categorize, I don't group, I don't basically fall into any group. I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. I'm independent. I'm a free thinker. Free thought. It's a great thing. People should try it. And I did that because I feel the Democrats and Republicans are essentially all the same. They talk outside each side of their tongue. You don't know who to believe anymore. And that's one of the concepts behind like this coffee shop thing, is to sit down. Sit down. I'm going to be sitting down with the people advocating against the Venice hospital relocation. And I'm going to invite Bob Moore with the hospital to get his thought, because where does the truth lie? I don't know. I was having a conversation with my wife, and I'm like, there's so many people out there. You hear so many different things. You don't know where the truth lies, and you can't just go believe in one source. Getting sidetracked, watching the 13th. The 13th is very interesting. It's about the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America, 1789. It was revised in 1992. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except... here's the key, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. What's that mean to us? Well, that's what the 13th is all about. The 13th is about how we have privatized the prison system. It's a for-profit system. And we have put into place laws that promote servitude, longevity in prisons. If there's no room in prison, slap an ankle bracelet on them. But it's all about production. In this movie, it'll probably drive some people on the right crazy in the beginning until it gets to the Clinton years with the 1994 crime bill. Then it'll drive the liberals crazy. But it's pretty point on. After all that, though, they start getting into, in the later parts of the series, into the crime. And how Boeing, JCPenney, all these companies out there are using prisoners as a form of slave labor. And it's sad. And essentially our prison systems are incorporated private money-making institutions are out there utilizing slave labor, and corporate America is in it 100%. We can all bitch and complain about the conditions in China, conditions in India. But what about the prison conditions? It was interesting, too. This documentary covered how some inmates are making parts for missile systems, which I thought was very intriguing. And it's all based upon that 13th Amendment. And this basically what this does is it covers how the 13th Amendment freed individuals, the black man basically, the black woman. But did it really? Because in the beginning it talks about how they had that clause in there, except as in punishment for a crime where have you been convicted, and how they started convicting all these ex-slaves of crimes, frivolous little issues. Then they would put them out in the fields and use them as slave labor. Then they even gone on further. And they talked about other issues, modern day issues. You saw Nixon in there, and you saw that quote in the very beginning, how Nixon's advisor said, we knew what we were doing. We wanted to villainize the anti-war people, the African Americans. We wanted to lock them up behind bars. We knew what we were doing. And if you don't think that continues today, folks, you are sorely mistaken. Surely mistaken. And it always amazes me, how individuals can go out and criminalize a group with their power they utilize, be it through media, be it through politicians. And they go out and project this image, and everybody buys into it, into a frenzy. And even in some forms I do. You can even look at the immigration situation. I caught myself about a week ago doing something, and I said, I got to reflect upon this, and why am I doing it in this manner? Whereas you see it a lot in Europe. They'll say, immigrant rapes 14-year-old girl. Well, that's just. Is there anyone in Sweden that's Swedish that's raping a 14-year-old girl? And when that happens, why don't you see Swedish man rapes a 14-year-old girl? And that's because they're pushing the narrative of the anti-immigration. Now, I am a guy, I believe we need border controls. I believe we need control on our immigration. Everybody knows I'm on that issue. But I think each side goes to extremes to push their narrative and vilify some groups that may not be that bad. There was news about an Iraqi immigrant that killed an officer. Or even here down in Fort Myers, a Somali immigrant killed an officer. But how many Americans have gone out and killed officers? And again, it's because they want to push that narrative about how bad immigrants are. My father was an immigrant. They're not all that bad. But then again, I am for controlled immigration. I have some grave concerns out there with a lot of the immigrants coming from Somalia and these different countries. So I got to be careful there, and I'm trying to be more cognizant of it because you fall into a situation like this. And like I said, it's not just Republicans. Democrats too. In 1994, the federal crime bill was passed by Clinton. His wife supported it, even though she claimed she didn't during the Barry Sanders. I think it's on it's going to come up soon here. Nixon pushed it with the anti-war protests, and everybody you saw in the beginning how his advisor said, yeah, we knew what we were doing. Clinton's made it worse. The 1994 crime bill basically, I don't know if it was part of it or before. You had 3 strikes and you're out. What's that do? It incarcerates primarily the black man, the Mexicans, the immigrants. And sorry if I'm not being politically correct in my terminology. It had mandated minimum mandates, minimum requirements for staying in prison. What's that do? It has this incorporated private prison that can go out and say, oh, look at that, mandatory minimums. We just got ourselves 13 years of slave labor where we can go out and produce products for corporate America that many Americans will purchase. And if you watch this 13th, you'll see, it's on Netflix, by the way. You'll see all the companies that are involved in it, and it may just disgust you to no end. You'll see that the politicians, no matter if it's right or left, have pushed this initiative, making it with this whole war on drugs. It all started a lot with the war on drugs with the whole crack epidemic in L.A., and a lot of the African Americans feel like, hey, yeah, they came after us because you had the white powder. That was the rich man's coke, but the crack was our coke, and they cracked down on us, even though it's the same thing except you're smoking one. And who pushed the whole crack initiative out there in L.A.? The CIA. Gary Webb broke that story. He was vilified by the CIA for their part in pushing it on the streets. It later came out that it was true. It was dead on accurate. That was a Reagan thing. But I thought it was interesting. I thought I would share this because, this one up here is talking about the healthcare issue in there. And like I said, you might get upset. In the beginning, if you're to the right, you'll be upset with some of the stuff you're probably hearing in there. After that, you'll be upset if you're on the left and you're hearing about how the Clintons supported it because you just don't want to hear that. But it's true with the legislation that was passed. After all that, then it levels out and it starts talking about the healthcare crisis and how healthcare is benefiting, how corporate America is benefiting on the backs of these individuals. And it doesn't even go into stuff like the basic stuff like Margaret Sanger. There's quotes out there, and I should have put it in this carousel, where basically she was pushing the whole abortion thing to depopulate the African American population out there. It was eugenics at its worst, but a lot of people don't understand that, and it's something that's highly supported by certain groups. And you might say, well, how's that? Well, Margaret Sanger said that. She's quoted saying that's one way to get rid of the African American population or to depopulate it. Also, you got to look at, and so many African Americans will tell you, you got to look at who primarily is going in and getting it. And they see it as a part of eugenics against the African Americans. It's all very interesting. So you got to ask yourself when you're out there and you're a normal, everyday person just like myself, am I a Republican? Am I a Democrat? Are they one and the same? Which they are. Pushing different narratives. And if you really delve into this different, the behind the scenes, the real history of our presidents, there's this movie I was watching. It's also on Netflix. It's by Oliver Stone. And he talks about how behind the scenes, what was really what the true history is compared to what's being taught. I think it was Napoleon. What's his name? The French guy, Napoleon, who said that history is created upon lies. You don't need to go too much further than to look at something like North Korea. In their history, they didn't start the war, which they did. In their history, they won the war, which they didn't. It was a draw. History is drawn upon lies. And America isn't special. They're drawn upon lies here too, folks. And it's sad. Sad state of affairs. So if you can, check it out. It's called 13th. It's based upon a 13th Amendment that basically made slave labor okay if it's someone that's been convicted of a crime, and how the privatization of American prisons are utilizing that to their full effect to offer slave labor, and how corporate America has bought into it hook, line, and sinker, and how Americans have bought into it hook, line, and sinker, buying into all those products. This has been Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report.